So tonight's session, we're actually talking about the concept of achieving financial independence in your retirement. The idea is that this is actually a lot more than just about money. It's actually about some of the habits that you're in, some of the thought processes, but some things that you need to be thinking about in addition to just, how do I save money, okay? So there's a lot more to it than that, but it's worthy of having these discussions, I think. As we always do in these sessions, we have to go through our disclaimer, and that is, this is not financial advice directly to you. I am a financial planner, and Yvonne actually asked a really good question earlier. She said, are you guys accountants? Are you guys all accountants? The answer is yes, we are. So in fact, any of the teams, so we've actually got TAG is a financial services business. Now what that means is that we've got a team that deals with taxes and businesses and things like that. We've got a team that specialises in superannuation. We've got a team that helps people with home loans and refinancing their home loans or getting new loans, whatever. And we've got a financial planning team as well. Now, at one point or another through my journey through TAG over the years, I've pretty much been involved in each of those teams in one way, shape or form. I'm now part of the financial planning team, but I duck in and out of the tax team and what have you in relation to dealing with client issues and stuff from time to time. So that's probably one of the reasons why I have a fairly broad knowledge about a lot of different topics. We're considered experts in the superannuation field in Australia. So I actually go and lecture to other accountants and financial advisors and lawyers about the topic of superannuation and all sorts of things that are superannuation related in various forums. So, you know, we've got a lot of specialty in a lot of those areas. So it's all about kind of trying to, and what we say is that the beauty of the financial planning team and what we try to do is pull together a lot of those elements. So it's not just about managing your money, it's actually about the strategy and understanding how the tax rules work, understand how the superannuation rules work, understand what you're trying to achieve, and the fact that there's usually a dozen different ways that you can actually achieve it. It's just about us finding the path that's going to fit you the best. That's kind of what we feel that our job is. So anyway, that's my disclaimer, and that's who TAG is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with TAG. So what does financial independence mean? That's a really good place to start, because the fact of the matter is it means different things to different people. Because the bottom line is, sometimes you don't actually know what financial independence means until you lose it, or that you don't have it. A lot of people think of financial independence as being, well, I just want to make sure that I've got enough money to live when I retire. And that's certainly one of the definitions. But it is beyond that, because financial independence can also be making sure that, well, what happens if something happens and I lose capacity? What happens if I lose my partner? What happens if something happens to my kids and they all of a sudden feel like they have to move back into the house with me? There's a range of potential what ifs that actually are all encompassing this financial independence. And some of it is things that you can't plan for. But having an awareness of what the issues are and what things that you can put in place to protect yourself or prepare yourself for these eventualities is actually a really good place to start. Some people, and once again, it also depends on what's important to you. So I have a lot of clients of mine where what's important to them is obviously, yes, they need to look after themselves, but then it's equally about, I want to make sure that the next generation is looked after in a responsible way. And this is where I get a lot of questions from my retiree clients about gifting to the next generation and how they do that. And so I tend to give a lot of counsel to those clients about what I feel works and what doesn't work, and what I've seen work and what I've seen not work. And because I've been in this industry I've been a director of TAG since it started 26 years ago. I've been in the industry for over 30 years. So Yes, I started when I was 10. I know that you were asking that question.
I thought it was 8.
Thank you, darling. You can come again. But yeah, in all honesty, because of that experience, I've had the luxury of being able to help clients through their various, and I've taken clients through their journeys. I have one family, I'll call them, that are clients that they've been clients of mine for 22 years. But it started with me with mum and dad, then mum passed, and then we went through all of that process. Then we had dad, who finished up becoming quite infirm over a period of time and lost interest in managing the finances that he always kept very close to his chest. And then transitioning that where his son was controlling it more, but we were giving counsel. And then it finished up, well, dad went into the nursing home, and then dad finished up passing, and now I'm actually dealing with the children, so the next generation, and now it's about kind of working them through, well, what's next for them. So that's a really good example of really kind of going right through the generational change, and therefore there were really good lessons that come out of all those interactions. That was a particular one that worked really, really well because of the family dynamic, and they were working really well as a family together, and it's always lovely to see that. But I've equally seen things where the family, as soon as there's the death, they fall apart, and there's actually a lot of conflict. So understanding where that conflict can sometimes come from helps us to then manage proactively, hopefully, to make sure that we do whatever we can to avoid that conflict, because conflict over money when people pass away is the biggest, one of the bigger reasons why families fall apart. And it's kind of understandable because it's very emotive at the best of times, but you throw that on top of the grief of losing someone, a loved one, and then throw money into the mix, it's not a real good mix. Okay, so, and I have a lot of clients say to me, no, but my kids really get along well, they'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? You don't know what they're going to be like in that situation. Let's plan for the worst and hope for the best. And then hopefully we get somewhere in between. So yeah, it's just good on that front. But yeah, we've got, going into nursing homes and knowing that might be a possibility down the track, and understanding what those rules are, or at least what the possibilities are for you. All of these things start becoming part of you being aware of your financial circumstances, what the possibilities are and what we want to allow for. And it's almost like starting to build up, what are your contingencies? What are your contingency plans? The what if. And there's so many what ifs. And I'm not saying that you should be jumping at shadows, but it's like you need to play a little bit of a what if game of, okay, well, what if something happened to me and I wasn't able to, live in this house anymore? What would I then do? What if my partner passes away? What if my partner doesn't pass away, but I can't look after him or her? And he has to go into some other arrangement because he needs care or whatever. So a lot of these things we can then convert into, what are the dollar implications to that? What are the things that you might do in those circumstances so that you know that you're going to be okay? And there are lots of different things you can do. Obviously it's, where are your savings? Are they in superannuation? Are they outside of superannuation? Is there enough liquid funds available to be able to do those things if something like that comes up? Insurance policies, depending on your age. It might be simply knowing that, look, if the wheels fall off and something really goes horribly wrong, well, I can always either sell my home and downsize, or start, do a reverse mortgage on my home perhaps. And what's a reverse mortgage and how does that work? And these are all things that are just really good information for you to know and have in the back of your mind, that these are potential options that I can adopt at some point in time in the future if I need to. Okay? So, knowing your financial framework is really the good place to start. And it really starts with knowing where your assets are. Now, it's really surprising. I've had some clients recently, and I grant you that she was a doctor, so she was very busy. But to have a client say to you, oh, and I just found a term deposit that I forgot about for $300,000. And I just said, I laughed when she told me this. I said, oh, it's just like when you put on a jacket you haven't worn for 6 months, you find $50 in the pocket. But it's funny, we laugh at that, but it happens a lot. Okay, that might be an extreme example, but it might be that there's a little share or something that's over there. It might be that you've got some gold bullion sitting in a safe somewhere. But part of what this is making sure that number one, you know where these assets are and the liabilities. But one of the things that we find holds up estate processes when you get to that end of life isn't actually the paperwork or the emotions or anything like that. It tends to be, the things that tend to hold it up is, where's the documentation for that? Where's the title of the house? Where's that information about that insurance policy? So knowing what the assets are and having a central place where that sort of information is kept is a really good idea. It's a really practical idea, and I know it's not particularly financial, but having seen the results when you can't find those types of things, I know how important it is and how costly it is if you can't find them. So when you're thinking about your legacy and you're thinking about putting your affairs in order, which you like to do that when there's not an event that makes you feel that it's necessary, okay? Because otherwise it can be really confronting thinking about, well, I need to do a will, or I need to do powers of attorney. I find it's always much better to be doing them where there's not a looming event that has forced you to do it, okay? Otherwise, once again, emotions take over, and I see a lot of avoidance. It's interesting, and this is once again just anecdotally, I find a lot more avoidance in the men than the women. It's an interesting thing. I find that women tend to be a little bit more pragmatic in that they kind of go, this is just a generalisation, but they tend to be, no, I just want to make sure that, my son or my daughter or whoever the person is that I trust with these things, they don't necessarily have to have the documents. In fact, it's better for them not to have the documents because sometimes they might change. But for them to know where to find them if something happens. Okay? It's the top shelf of that filing cabinet, or it's in a safe at the bank and here's the person that you need to contact if that were the case. Or my accountant's got all of that key information in their records, or whatever the place is, important for them to know where it is and how to get it. Okay? So that's a really good tip. Understanding where your income is going to come from. Now, obviously, when you're working, the majority of that is going to be your salary and understanding what goes into your bank. If you're a business person, then it's understanding the dynamics of your business, and that's a completely another topic, so I'm not going to sort of go down the business front tonight. But knowing where the income comes from. Now, when you're going into retirement, you also need to know where your income's going to come from in that environment, because this is where a lot of people find a lot of stress as they retire, because it is such a fundamental change to their, what I call their financial framework. And this is where one of the things that we suggest and encourage is that as you make that transition from working and regularly getting a paycheck, if you like, whether it be monthly or weekly or whatever the timing is to, as best as you can, mimic those financial patterns in your retirement, because it helps with that transition. For you just to know that, oh, okay, well, I know that I'm going to get, $500 a week or however much per fortnight or whatever the amount is that you need, just knowing that that's going to pop into your bank account every week or whatever takes a lot of stress off. Next question then is, where's that coming from? Some of it might be coming from Centrelink. you know, if you satisfy the various rules. Some of it might be coming from your own superannuation savings, or you might have some investment properties that are paying you rent or whatever. But know what is coming in, when it's coming in, and to a certain extent you can help manipulate the timing of when some of those things come to you. And the more you can mimic what was happening when you were working, the easier it is going to be for you personally to manage your financial framework. Okay? Understand what you're going to be entitled to. I had a client yesterday who basically said, you know, and this is once again depends on your level of technology prowess sometimes, in how easy or difficult it is to deal with Centrelink. Yeah, see? That's exactly the reaction I was hoping for. Exactly, it's not easy. They were just trying to get a MyGov account set up so that they could have a look at lodging a Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card application. They basically threw their hands up in the air and said, oh, it's just too hard. She said she spent 4 days just trying to get the MyGov account open. She finally got it open. Then she had to try to set up links to the Centrelink thing, and she just got it too hard. She's now had to employ her son to help her, but of course you can't have him help her unless she's sitting next to her, because there's all these, you know, the 2 or 3 factor authentication things every time you go in and out. So it's not as easy. Back in the good old days, you used to have a form that you'd fill out, and you'd go down and, you know, wait for a couple of hours in the Centrelink office and wait for someone to see you. But, you know, that's not ideal at the moment. They want you to do everything online. Now, that's not to say that you can't go down to Centrelink and get them to help you, if that is the case. But you want to try to do as much as you can, because otherwise you're going to have a very long wait. Just a point on that, if you do need or want to get some assistance from Centrelink, we recommend that you call and actually make an appointment with someone. That means that you actually have a time that you need to go. You might have to wait a little bit, but you're not, I'll call it, in with the great unwashed, sitting in the waiting room with everybody else. If you've got an appointment, it means that you're going to get escalated and you'll get through a little bit easier and quicker. Okay, so that's just a little tip on that. But even if you're not entitled to Centrelink, you might be entitled to things like, and I mentioned the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card as an example. Certainly that one in particular has had a massive change in the last 12 months, maybe 18 months, where it used to be that if you had an income as a family, if you like, of $80,000 or $90,000, then you weren't eligible for it. But that threshold almost doubled. So you could have a threshold, you could have an income amount of $180,000 and be entitled to the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card. Now, it doesn't give you all the great discounts that having an age pension might give you. So it won't give you discounts on your power bill or your rates or your car regos or anything like that, but it will give you discounts on your pharmaceuticals, for example. So if anybody's got some medical issues, then it becomes very important to them. And it might give you some discounts when you go into the pub for a meal, I don't know. But mostly it's the pharmaceuticals, okay? So once again, you might actually get into your retirement and say, well, okay, I could get it and I'm eligible for it, but it probably doesn't mean that much to me. But there may come a time when it does. So once again, just understanding what you're entitled to might not help you right now, but it's that alarm bell that could ring at a point in time down the track that could be important to you. This is the next step of the exercise in working out your financial framework, is actually being really clear on what's important to you. The reason why I say this is that I'm not a big believer in budgets. Now, I know that's going to shock you all because I'm an accountant, I'm a financial planner, and you'd probably expect me to go, you should do a budget, it should be this, it should be that. the concept of budgeting is great. And on paper, it's fabulous. And yes, we should all do it. But the reality is we don't. And generally speaking, as soon as I talk to clients about doing a budget, it's almost like you'd see the shutters going up.
Oh, I love budgets.
You would have to be one of the 5%, okay? You're the
30 years of it.
I know. Hey, you're in the minority. If you can do it, all power to you. I'm not saying that they're bad. They're fabulous. What I'm saying is that for the majority of the population, they don't work. Because if you think about it, it's a little bit like dieting. And I can say this because I'm really bad at dieting too. The idea of dieting is what I can't do, what I shouldn't eat. Go without this. Don't eat that. It's all about
Don't
the negative.
Bourbon.
I know. So it's all about the negative. And budgeting's a little bit the same. It's got a connotation of, well, I've got this much that I'm allowed to spend on my groceries this week. I'm going to get to that point, and if I go over it, I've failed, or I'm bad, or you start to judge yourself, or you start going, well, I'm not going to buy that thing, and I'm going to, I don't know. It's not a particularly happy or enjoyable experience is the bottom line, okay? And that's why budgets don't tend to work very well, is because people can't stick to them because it's too bloomin' depressing. It's just not enjoyable. And if it's not sustainable, if it's not a pattern of behaviour that you can sustain long term, then it's not going to work. A little bit like dieting.
Fixed costs, though.
This is a different
That's
thing.
what I
Yes,
enjoy.
yeah, and that's a different thing to budgeting, okay? In a way, part of it is just get rid of that word, because that word has a negative connotation and it doesn't work. Knowing what your fixed costs are is important information. Now, I had a client once, she was fabulous at it, I've got to say, and this goes to the nth degree, but it's really interesting from the perspective of just understanding how you can actually do these things. She had, one of those notebooks that had the clear plastic sleeves in it? Clear plastic, yeah. She actually had a pocket labelled for all of her main fixed costs. Groceries, the car rego, the car insurance, the rates, all the stuff. And she would take cash out every week
Oh, stop it.
and she would put the allocation into those plastic, it was a few years ago, but she would do that and she was doing it and it was working for her. And this is my point, it was working for her. I don't reckon I'd have any other client that would necessarily work for, because it's too hard. There's a lot of work associated with that. But it's about working out what will work for you, okay? So in that instance, the lesson that is important out of that one is the concept of understanding that there are certain costs that are consistent and reasonably predictable. Every week, every month, maybe it's every 6 months, every year, there are cycles that these things go through. But the nature of those cycles, a little bit like life, is that it's not a straight line. It's a bit of a roller coaster. And one of the things that tends to stuff people up is they work out what their, I'll call it budget is, or what they expect that they need to live on an annual basis, and then they just divide it by 12 or they divide it by 52. And they go, well, that's how much I've got this week. But the problem is that you've got all these lumpy expenses that then tend to take them by surprise. So, and this is actually something that I actually get my younger clients to embrace, is the idea of actually having a separate bank account, not the plastic sleeve, so it's the concept of the plastic sleeve, but it's a more modern day variation of it, but actually have that separate account that is specifically for your lumpy expenses. That way, you then only have come into your bank account every week or month or whatever it is, what is your normal weekly routine expenditures. That way, it's almost like the reverse of budgeting, in that you have the money go into your account that you know it's okay for you to spend, and the lumpy expense money goes into the lumpy account. Call it something funny so that it gives you a bit of a smile. Call it the lumpy account if you like.
Emergency.
Well, it's not really emergency because it's the lumpy expenses. It's the car rego that is either once or twice a year,
No, that's fixed.
but it's still fixed, but it's lumpy.
Oh, okay, no.
Do you know what I mean?
No.
Because it's only coming twice a year. And the rates, they're coming, well, you can now usually, often you can actually choose to pay rates on a monthly basis, but it depends on what council I guess you're in. But there are these lumpy expenses. If you can pull those lumpy expenses and have them coming out of this other account, then you don't tend to feel as much of the pressure or the stress of those lumpy expenses when they come in. And that is a lesson that may not be that relevant for you because you might think you've got a pretty good handle on it and it's okay, but the next generation tend to be really bad at that. So that's actually a really good lesson if you wanted to share that with the next generation down or the next generation again. It's a good one because that's something that I set up as a regular thing with it's actually often the children of my clients. I'll have a meeting with them quite often when they've been in full-time employment for about 12 months is when I get them to come in. Mum and Dad usually pay for my time to meet with the kids because this is an interesting thing. Do I tell them anything different to what Mum and Dad would have told them? No. Because Mum and Dad probably know all of these little tricks and it works really quite well for them. But will the children hear it from Mum and Dad? No, they won't. So it's an interesting thing. I find that this whole topic of finance is as much about the psychology of money as it is about the actual money itself. So it's an interesting thing. And then you can go another step further and actually have your separate account for your holidays or your fun stuff if you want to. For me, that's really important. For me, I live for travel. So for me, that's actually a really important part of my financial framework. For other people, it might be fast cars, it might buy, who knows, I don't know, it might be spending money on your grandkids. I don't know what yours is, but it's really important to get clear on what the things are that are important to you. Because one of the concepts that I love talking about is the idea of financial leakage. I don't know if you've heard that terminology before, but let me give you an example of what financial leakage is. I had a client who, he came to me, young fella, and he was spending, I'll call it $1,600 a week on gym memberships and PT, personal trainers, and a diet routine. That was my reaction as well. But then I dug down, because this is really important, is that I go into these things I try to be as impartial as I possibly can and not put my own biases on these situations. So I asked him some questions. What I finished up finding out is that where for me, that would have been financial leakage, because that just would have been a waste of money for me. But that's me. For him though, his mother had very recently passed away, like 6 months ago. He'd found her in the house. He was traumatised. He had, through that 6 months, put on a lot of weight and had gone through depression. And him working on himself and his physicality, if you like, and getting himself back to good has been part of his recovery. So for him, in that circumstance, it wasn't financial leakage. It was completely necessary. It was survival for him, exactly. Now, what I did though then say is, that's great and I want you to continue this as long as you need to, but it's not going to be sustainable long term. How are we going to manage this? So the way, and we talked about it, and he talked about the fact, well, I think that I'm going to need to keep with the meal plans for longer because I'm not very good at cooking and that's keeping that going well, but I probably am almost at a point where I can back off some of the personal trainer appointments and I can start doing that a little bit more on my own because I'm starting to feel a lot better about myself, etc. So we just put a plan in place to back that off, but to keep the stuff that was essential, because that was what was going to be sustainable for him going forward. The reason why I tell you that story is because to understand the difference between financial leakage and what might be a necessity. So something that might be financial leakage for one person could be a necessity for somebody else.
That's a good point.
Okay? So once again, it comes back to what's important to you is what is important. It might not be important to somebody else, but if it's important to you, then you need to prioritise it. And the financial leakage elements are the things that you deprioritise. So, an example of financial leakage, I've talked to a lot of younger people about again, is the concept of going out and buying coffee. Okay, it's an example, it's a frivolous example, but when you're buying 2 or 3 coffees a day, and they're $5 each, over a period of time, that adds up. Now, for some people, that might be essential for them. Yeah, because I've become I'm a coffee snob. I'm happy to tell you I'm a coffee snob. But by the same token, we've now got a coffee machine here in the office. So I just have one here, and it's more than satisfactory. Yeah, no, it's actually quite good. Actually, they're very good, I must say. And if I'm out, I'll buy 1 a day, but that's my limit.
Yeah, 1, 2, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I won't go to 3. If I feel like another coffee, well, you know, I just have to manage it.
Bad
So
day too.
this might be where, for some people, the 1 coffee a day might be their way of connecting with people. You know, there might be a story around it, but the extra 2 might be the financial leakage. So once again, some of this comes down to understanding what's important to you and understanding why. Because the why behind it is where things get really interesting. And if you're able to ask yourself that question, because it's never the one question, is what I find. It's, why is that important to you? Oh, why that? And then tell me more about that. Okay, because usually the first answer.
The stronger you will tell, the weaker you.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's almost like you need to have a conversation with yourself.
So can I interrupt? for a
Yeah,
moment?
absolutely.
So I go for a lot of walking,
Yes.
and every time I go for a big walk,
Yep.
it's an hour at a time.
Mhm.
And my reward is halfway through, there's a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
motivational.
So that's so that's motivational. So
Yes.
that might have been. So this is a great live example.
Wow.
So I would ask you the question. That may have been where it started. It was something that motivated you to do the walk.
Yes, yeah.
I would ask you, do you feel like you still need that motivation? Or it's just a bit of a treat at that point in time?
Oh, it's a treat now because
Yes.
I walk 4 to 5 times a day, but only twice do I.
Do you get the coffee? So, and
Do you walk all day?
I was going to say.
Never 5. No, never 5.
But it's interesting, and this is probably where the
steak, not a coffee.
if we were wanting to drill down on this as an example, and because this is the element, because you might go, actually, you know what, it's within my financial framework, I'm making a conscious decision to do it, because that's a big thing, because financial leakage tends to be where you're not making a conscious decision to do it. You just kind of do it out of habit, but it doesn't actually mean anything to you. Okay? If it means something to you and you really enjoy it and it helps keep that walking routine a really enjoyable part of your life, I would almost argue that it probably isn't financial leakage. But if it's not, or if it's automatic now, I just ask you, challenge you to kind of go, is it actually that important to me in that routine? Or would it be okay for me just to have a coffee when I get home? And I'm just asking the question. So you don't have to answer that, but this is the sort of questioning that goes on, okay? Because it might be that it starts off being really deliberate and very important to you, but then it becomes the habit. And that's where, if it's just a habit and it doesn't mean that much to you, they're the things that I want you to question. Because the things that mean something to you are the things that I want you to prioritise. Yeah? The risk of liquid assets. Oh, crikey. Okay. Is something that I just want you to be really mindful of. And Yvonne, you were talking about properties and things like that. People quite often will go into their retirement years or preparing for retirement. And it's not uncommon in Australia for people of our era to own investment property. And this is probably where there is a misconception about how valuable that is to you in the retirement phase. Because we've heard over the years, and probably, we may have all had some success with property investment in some way, shape or form, even if it's only our family home, doubling in value over a period of time or whatever. But we've had some success with property, and therefore it's something that we feel like we know, and therefore we go, oh well, it's going to then provide me with an income stream in the form of rent, etc. in my elderly years. Therefore it's good. My problem with that mindset is that it's not bad, but it might not be suitable once you get into retirement, because you've got to understand that you've got certain cash flow needs. And the fact of the matter is that an investment property, particularly a residential investment property, is generally going to yield you somewhere between 2.8 and 3%, generally speaking. Then you're going to have all the costs associated with it, which would be nowadays probably $6,000 or more per annum.
More.
Yeah, exactly,
Yes.
depending on the nature of the property and where it is and
Yes.
what have you. Which means that you finish up, you're lucky to get 1% often. Now, if you're relying on that 1% to fund your lifestyle, I'm here to tell you, you're going to have a lot of assets. Okay? So, unless that is the case, there is going to be a point in time where if you've got investment properties, you need to be thinking about how long is it reasonable for me to keep these, and at what point might I be in a position where I should sell or have to sell them, because as we know, you don't want to get yourself in a position where you've got 2 months worth of cash and then you're making the decision to sell a property, because that's when the market will fall down by 10% and you'll then feel like you can't sell it, and then you're in a world of pain.
And to manage through capital gains through
Through your super.
There's all rules.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
once you hit 75, that's kind
Correct.
of it. So
Spot
people,
on.
please be prepared. I didn't prepare to
Yeah.
retire, and here I am back working, and
Yeah.
just in a bad way.
Yeah. So that concept
Didn't
of
manage my properties, no.
yeah, and it really comes down to, you want to have a really good picture of what that retirement
Yeah,
is going to
way
look like
before you
way before you
retire.
make the decision.
So do you have the properties in your super fund?
No, I live in one, and I've just got my mum's home in the country. It's not even worth a lot of money, but it's a big headache now because
Yeah.
I'm kind of retired, and now I've got too many assets, so no Centrelink,
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
and now I'm back at
And
work.
you've got a property that probably, if it's in the country and it's, as a small property, it might be that it's costing you money, or you need to spend a lot of money on it to repair it or something.
In it. I'm just,
Yeah,
just
holding
sitting
it.
there.
Yeah.
Dan's not very happy about that.
Yes.
Although Dan's gone now.
Yes, we've got to find somebody else to blame now. But the point is,
Oh, please be
a really good one
prepared.
is being prepared.
Oh.
And the idea, and there's some really key age milestones.
Yes.
One of them is
75's
75.
the end of it.
So 75 is
And
basically
1
where
month, and
you
1
can't
month.
put any more money into super.
And 1 month.
Oh, well, yeah.
Can you
The
ex-
other milestone, yeah, go
Can
on.
you explain more about these?
These age limits,
And what
absolutely.
you can do with
Absolutely.
properties?
Yeah.
So 75 is basically the limit where, and this is only a fairly new change,
Yes.
where you can now put up to $110,000 per person into super right up to the age of 75 as what they call a non-concessional contribution. Now,
And then you convert it for your capital gains and things like that.
no, that's a different thing altogether.
Ah.
I'm going to just jump ahead.
Sorry, but with that contribution up to 75, do you have
Yep.
to satisfy the work test?
No, this is
No,
the change
not for that.
that's happened. So
Okay.
the change is that you don't have to satisfy the work test in order to be able to put those in. The nature of these non-concessional contributions is that they are essentially your own money and you're effectively gifting the money into the superannuation fund. So you're not claiming
It's
a tax
already
deduction for it.
taxed, yeah.
It is.
Okay? If you are going to try to claim a tax deduction for the super contribution, that's the
concessional.
27,500 limit.
I think it's gone up a bit more now.
No, it's 27,500. It
still-
used to be 25.
Yeah.
It's now 27,500. That's the amount that you can claim a tax deduction for, or someone can claim a tax deduction for. It might be your employer because of the superannuation guarantee. It may be you putting your own money in and claiming a tax deduction personally. You can do both now. That, if you're over the age of 67, you need to have satisfied the work test
Yes.
to do that. It's between 67 and 75. You can put money in, but if you want to claim a tax deduction for it, then you need to satisfy the work test. So they're the two big limits. The other one with this $110,000 per annum up to age 75 is that you can actually also do 3 years at a time. So say you sell your investment property or whatever, and you want to take the proceeds of that after you've paid the loan off and what have you, and you want to put that into your superannuation, then you've got essentially $330,000 that you can do in one hit. And all that means is that you've just brought forward the next 2 years worth of that limit, okay?
It's still got to be taxed though, doesn't it?
No, as it goes into the super fund, so not only are you not getting a tax deduction as it goes into super, the superannuation doesn't pay tax on that contribution either. Whereas for the concessional contributions, which is the 27,500 that someone has claimed a tax deduction for, the super fund actually pays 15% tax as it goes in. Okay, so that's where it's quite
Yeah, I'm
different.
a bit confused about. I have to come and see you.
Yeah, okay. So very different rules for those two different things. But if you think about it as concessional is I'm getting a concession, as in I'm claiming a tax deduction for it, that's the $27,500 limit. The non-concessional is in I'm not getting any tax deduction or tax benefit from it. That's going to be tax-free. For me, I don't get any tax benefit, but the super fund also doesn't pay any tax on that contribution.
But you can't put a capital gain through that way.
No, that doesn't help you with your capital gain.
No.
It's only if you can satisfy the
It's
work
the
test.
15% work test.
It's
Concessional.
if it's concessional, then if you're over 67, you have to satisfy the work test, and then as it goes in, it gets taxed at 15%. There's other rules as well, but they're the basic ones. You're also going to ask me what's the work test, and I'm conscious
I
of
know the work test.
So the work test is that you have to have worked for gainful employment for 40 hours in a 30-day consecutive period. Once in that year. So you only have to do it once. And as long as you've done that once, you then basically put your hand on your heart and say, yes, I've satisfied the work test, and then you can do that. But it has to be gainful employment. So for example, if you do some charity work, you're not getting paid for that, so therefore that's not gainful employment.
Yeah.
Okay?
But
If-
could you be,
Yeah.
paid at like a shareholder fee or director's fee?
Yes,
to
you
gain-
can.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
And the interesting thing is that there's no rule that says that what you're paid has to be market value.
Just that you have to be paid.
Just that you have to be paid. So, for example, you might do your 40 hours, get paid $1,000, which is significantly less than market, but that still satisfies the test because you've been paid, you've had some sort of gain for that employment. I've got a number of clients who have family that have their own businesses. Obviously that makes it quite a lot easier. They just basically put their hand up and say, hey, I can help you out in the office, or I'll mop out the stables, or whatever they want to do. I'll give you that 40 hours. You pay me, you'll have to put me on the payroll or whatever, do it all properly because it has to be documented. That income then goes in your tax return so that it's it's fully documented. Then you'd be able to claim that tax deduction. Now, on that tax deduction thing, if you've been a few years where you've not had income, and so the capital gain is probably a really good example, and then all of a sudden you sell that investment property and you've got a capital gain, if you've got your superannuation is less than $500,000 in balance, then there is an opportunity for us to look back for the last 5 years, and if you've not claimed up to the higher limit, so the $27,500 for example, you can kind of basically go and put a bit more into super and basically claim back what you haven't claimed in the last 5 years. Okay, so there's...
But you still pay the 15%.
Oh yeah, the
tax.
super fund still pays 15% as it goes in, but you get to claim a tax deduction for more than just the 27.5. It's whatever this
Chop up is.
the chop up is, yeah. So that's just something that's worth keeping in the back of your mind. It'll only work if, as at the previous 30 June, your superannuation balance, your total super balance was less than $500,000.
So can you get your transfer super balance between yourself and spouse to get one of them under the 500 grand?
Possibly.
Right.
Yeah, possibly, and I have done that on
There's
occasion.
lots of
Yes.
tricks, isn't there?
So once again, it comes down to being as proactive as you can, because if you were coming to me and you said, well, I've got this rental property that's in my name because when I was working, it was, I was trying to get the negative gearing, whatever the reasons were. We plan to sell it sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. My superannuation is here, my wife's superannuation is here. I'd be kind of looking at an opportunity if you're retired. If your super is at 700,000, I'd say, well, maybe we pull $250,000 out of your super, give it to your wife, so that you're under the $500,000 limit, so that when you go to sell that property, we can then potentially access these additional tax deductions.
Right.
So this is where being able to kind of proactively talk to someone about what your plans are in the future, there might be some tricks or, strategies that we can adopt to make a big difference in the tax outcome in 12, 18 months, 2 years' time.
Yeah.
When that property is sold in 12 or 18 months' time,
Yep.
are those capital gains taxed?
Yes, they will be.
Have to be in your tax return.
Yeah, it has to go into your tax return. So let's, just to use an example. So let's use an example that you've got $1 million property that you sell and you've owned it for 15 years. So you actually are making a $500,000 capital gain on it, right? And let's say it's in your name. Because you've owned it for more than 12 months, you would automatically get a half discount. Automatic. Okay, as long as you've owned it for more than 12 months, you'll get that. So we're now dealing with a $250,000 capital gain.
How did you get it down to 500?
That's just the capital gain. That's how much we sold it for. Where
Oh,
I'm assuming
minus
that
the
it's doubled in
cost.
value
Minus
over that
the
15
cost.
years'
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Okay, so that's
yeah.
just the cost base.
Yeah.
So we've now got $250,000, and if we didn't do anything else, that would have to go into your personal tax return, and you'd probably pay $80,000 of tax, somewhere between 80 and 100,000. That's a lot of tax. Having said that, this is where, if it's been a few years since you've, let's say it's, and I'm just going to use, I'm only an accountant, so you know I'm not good at maths in my head, although I've brought my calculator for that reason. But let's say that there's been 3 years and you haven't maximised your superannuation contributions. You might be able to get a tax deduction for $75,000 for putting that into superannuation. All of a sudden, you've now got $175,000 worth of, you know, what you actually then finish up having to put in your tax return. And you're now down under the top marginal tax rate. So really, the difference here is that that $75,000 that's gone into super is going to get taxed at 15%. If that was in your own name, it would have been getting taxed at 47%.
Yeah.
So that could make, actually I'm not even going to try to work that out in my head.
It's still a lot, though. Still too much.
If you make a profit, I don't mind paying tax as long as I've made a profit. That alone, that's just saved you $24,000 of tax. Okay, so that might bring it down from $80,000 worth of tax down to 55. So that's a significant potential advantage. Okay.
So that's just topping up your concessional amount.
Correct. Spot on. Correct.
Over a number of years.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Spot on.
Yep.
Okay. So, but this is where it's all about strategy.
Yes.
And this is where I would say to you, one of the strategies becomes, if that's one of the things that you're planning to do at some point in time, what's the age that you need to be really thinking pretty hard about the timing when you do this?
Oh no.
Because age 67 is basically when they change the rules where you can make a contribution to super if you're over the age of 67, right up to age 75, but you can't claim a tax deduction for it, i.e. you wouldn't be able to get this advantage unless you put that super contribution in before you turn age 67. Unless you're able to manufacture some sort of work test.
Oh, work test.
Yep. If you're able to satisfy the work test, then you're okay. But if you're not working, then 67 is a really important milestone,
That's
age
why
milestone.
I'm still working.
Okay? Now my question is whether I can get this thing back again. I think I've been too clever for myself. Here's that one. Oh, yay! Okay. So this is what we were just talking about. The removal of the work test for these voluntary contributions up to age 75. Okay? The bring forward rule will still apply, so that's basically using 3 years at a time. Here's essentially those two rules that we've been talking about. So
Can I take a photo of them?
you've actually got a copy of the
they're in
slides
here, are
there.
they?
Yep, you've got a copy of the slides, and you'll also get an email following up from today with a hard copy of those slides or a soft copy of the slides as well. So, okay, but this is basically these thresholds that you're talking about. So it's 27,500. It's been that limit since the 1st of July 2021, so they've been there for a little while now. It's probably almost due for another uplift, so we'll see how that goes. And the other limit is the 110,000, once again at the same time as when that increased. Now there is such a thing as the transfer balance cap, that is another set of rules that we need to be aware of. Transfer balance cap is basically that if you have more than $1.9 million, here we go, that's a different one. Yeah, if there's basically more than $1.9 million in super, then you can't make any more non-concessional contributions. Okay, those voluntary ones. If you are getting too close to that 1.9 million, then there are limits on whether you can actually do the 3-year bring forward. Okay, so that's important for you to be aware of if you're starting to get close to that $1.9 million limit. And once again, if you are getting close to the 1.9, but your spouse has got a lower balance, this is where, once again, we can maybe pull money out of yours, put it into hers, even up the balances so that we've got more capacity for both of you to keep doing some of these strategies.
So just quickly, why do they call it the transfer balance cap? Every time I hear that term, I go, what the hell, I freak out and I don't know, shut down, so.
Understandable. There are so many three-letter acronyms in the superannuation industry, it's ridiculous. So there's two numbers. They are the same number, but they actually represent different limits. There's the total superannuation balance, so TSB, which is $1.9 million now. That's the limit where if you go over that, you can't make any more contributions to super, okay?
Right.
The same number is also the transfer balance cap, which is the TBC. What that is essentially saying, hey, you might have $3 million in super because, you know, you've had some investments that have done really well or whatever, but you're only allowed to have 1.9 million, so this transfer balance cap is the amount that you're allowed to have in pension mode. Okay? That's essentially what they're trying to get at.
Yeah.
And essentially that was the government's way of saying, hey, there's a really good concessions for being in pension mode in superannuation, i.e. you go from the super fund paying 15% on all its earnings to basically paying 0% on its earnings. It's too much of a concession for them to then just give it to everybody for everything. So they've basically just said, hey, you only get that concession for up to your 1.9 mil.
Yeah.
Okay? Now the way, there's all sorts of, it's all about at the time that you start the pension. So for example, if you start your pension with 1.9 mil, and say in 2 years' time you've got some investments that do really, really well and your 1.9 then becomes 2.5, well, that still is in pension mode. So they don't kind of retrospectively go, oh, we're going to peel that back. So that's fine. But the reverse is also true. If you've got some investments in there that tank there and your 1.9 goes down to 1, well, you're kind of left with the fact that I've already used up my limit.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's more about at what point in time you start the pension. What happens after then is what happens. Okay.
Is there an age that it is compulsory to start a pension?
Great question. No,
Right. Yeah.
you could leave your superannuation in accumulation mode forever
Okay.
up until you pass away. But while you're alive, you can leave it in accumulation mode if you want to.
Mhm.
It's not as tax effective as being in pension mode, but if you don't need the money and if it makes sense for you, then it might be that you just leave it in accumulation mode. So you could do that if you wish.
Can lump sums be taken?
Yes, lump sums can be taken. So once again, as soon as you have satisfied the definition of retirement and you're over the age of 60, or you've reached the age of 65, sorry, there's another age limit that's irrelevant. As soon as you hit 65, you don't even have to be retired and you can get access to your super in the form of either lump sums or as an income stream. We prefer the income stream idea purely because it then triggers this zero tax regime, which is pretty cool. Okay? But there might be circumstances where you don't want to have that come out of super. You might want to leave it in super for whatever reason. Once again, it comes down to your personal preferences and what you're trying to achieve. Okay? Okay, we've talked about all these three-letter acronyms. Oh, the other thing that has changed this year, for the last 3 years I think it's been, there is such a thing as once you turn your pension on, you then are required, in order for it to stay in pension mode, you have to actually take what they call the minimum pension. Okay? Now the minimum pension, and I've got a slide on that as well. Here we go. The minimum pension is essentially a percentage of whatever the balance was in pension mode at the previous 30 June. Okay? So for example, if you're under 65, then it's 4%. If you're between 75 and 79, it's 6%. So you'll notice here that the percentages actually go up as you get older. Okay? The idea being they actually don't want you to keep your money in super until you die. Okay, they don't want you leaving a heap of super in for it to go down to the next generation. That's not what they want, because they want to limit how much stays in this very concessional tax environment. Okay, so that's why they've done that. Now, the last 3 years, basically because of COVID, they basically reduced the minimum that had to be taken out every year by half. Okay, so over the last few years, we've had a number of clients that have just been taking the minimums out of their super fund pensions because they haven't needed. And quite frankly, while we're in lockdowns, we weren't spending very much, so it kind of made sense. Now, that is just the minimum. You can take more than the minimum if you wish. Okay, it's perfectly fine for you to take more than the minimum, but this is the minimum that you have to take. If you don't take the minimum, then you're essentially deemed for it not to be in pension mode, and therefore you lose that zero tax rate concession. Okay, so being aware of those minimum limits and what have you are really important, and they get remeasured every year. Bottom line is we're back up to the normal percentages now. We're no longer working in this 50% zone. Okay, I've done a lot of talking, and I think that I've covered the majority. We've sort of jumped around a little bit, but I just want to now double back to the question that I asked you when you first came in, and that is, what were your questions, and are there any of the questions that you had on your piece of paper that I haven't covered that we can have a chat about?
Yeah, can I start?
Yeah.
So you talked about accumulation mode and pension mode.
Yes.
What I'm kind of interested in is the in-between, so the transition to...
Oh, the transition to retirement pension, yeah.
And you know, you hear about people that are still working, probably
Yes.
full-time like myself.
Yes.
And they pull money out, they switch it to a transition to retirement account, and
Yes.
then they contribute it back in.
Yes.
And why do they do that?
Why do they do that? What a
Yeah.
great question. So a couple of things. That transition to pension, transition to pension mode, let's call it. And they call it TRAPS or TRISs, or there's all sorts of, once again, they love these 2, 3 or 4 letter acronyms. It used to be really effective. Then they changed the rule that basically said, hey, if it's a transition to retirement pension, therefore you haven't actually retired yet, other than the fact that you're over the age of 60, you're not entitled to the additional concessions associated with it being in pension mode, i.e. that the underlying assets that make up that pension are taxed at 0%. Okay? So you can turn the pension on, this transition to retirement pension, but you're not going to get the zero tax inside the super fund benefit until such time as you actually become, I'll call it properly retired, or it's actually, the terminology is you've triggered a condition of release. Now that trigger of the condition of release can be either you retire, and there's a whole definition about retirement, between the age of 60 and 65, or you reach the age of 65. As soon as you touch 65, it becomes a proper pension.
Yeah.
Okay? You don't have to retire or do anything different. The mere fact that you've turned age 65 is enough. Okay? But that in-between zone, the reason why people do it, the reasons why I would recommend people to do it would be if they're basically living pretty much on their current income, so that the net income that they're getting from their wage is essentially funding their lifestyle and they need that money. But we sort of say, well, yeah, but you'd be able to get a better result if you claimed a tax deduction for some money going into super. Well, then you can turn this pension on, I'll call it, get $10,000 a year out of the pension, but essentially put it straight back into super and claim a tax deduction for it.
Right.
Okay? So that's one
So if
potential
you're
benefit.
already claiming the 27.5, it's no point doing it.
No.
So, okay.
I wouldn't have thought so. The other way that we sometimes use it is where we've got someone who's been working full time and they want to go down to part time, but the part time work might not necessarily fully sustain their lifestyle needs, in which case we can turn on one of these transition to retirement pensions just to supplement their income, to allow them to transition to retirement a little bit easier. So they're the two reasons that we would quite often use those transition to retirement pensions.
Yeah, okay.
Great question. Anybody else?
Thank you.
And then I can come back to you if you've got another question. Anybody else got questions that we haven't covered already?
So, if we're not working on a budget,
Yes.
how do we work out how much money we need to
Great
retire
question.
on?
Great question. That's a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking it. I have this, I've got this, I call it a method that I use. I call it my reverse budget. Okay? Essentially what you do is you go, okay, well, how much is coming in to the bank account every week or month or whatever from my salary?
Yes.
And then how much, and that's just net cash, how much am I either paying off my home loan or in some way saving on an annual basis, or you might do it quarterly and extrapolate it out. But that's actually a really good place to start. Now, that is literally just where I say you start. What I would recommend everyone to do, and this is not about budgeting, this is about you understanding where your money goes. And I'm sorry to tell you that the easiest way to do it is to do it the hard way. And that is, go through your bank statements. More often it's your credit card. I mean, it depends on how you live. I know for me, pretty much everything goes through the credit card. So if and quite often the banks will have apps or mechanisms where they can summarise where your money has gone. Oh, this has gone in groceries, this has gone to, entertainment, your Foxtel and your Stan and all those sorts of things. But they will often allow you to categorise it and you can get a report. If most of the major banks have some sort of mechanism like that, so that could help simplify it. Then you work out where your money is actually going. Now, the reason why it's important to do that is because that's when you double back around and you go, where is that money going where it doesn't actually mean that much to me? That's where you identify your financial leakage, okay? Because I can tell you, because I've done it a number of times myself, and even me, I preach this all the time. I'm still here to tell you that every time I do it for myself, it is very confronting. And there is always something that you can look at where you can improve it.
Subscriptions.
Subscriptions is a nutter.
Yeah.
I mean, my kids bag me out for this, but I basically say, well, what's wrong with us just setting up a Stan account, using it for the first 3 months, because then you can watch all the things that you want to watch on Stan, then we close that down, then we open up the Disney or the Apple, or whatever the things are, rather than having 5 subscriptions that are all doing loosely the same thing, and you're probably only using 1 or 2 of them at a time. Just cycle them through. Anyway, my kids are very demanding, so they won't let me do that. But as soon as they move out of the house, we're going to be doing that. But yeah, these are just examples where when you start drilling down on these things, there are going to be things that pop out at you. My recommendation to you is don't try to tackle it all at once. Don't try to tackle it all at once. It's too much. And what's going to happen is you're going to get overwhelmed by what you need to do, and then you'll finish up doing nothing. What works much better, in my view, is pick a category and go, wow, entertainment, $12,000 a year. Okay, that seems like a lot, and I don't feel like I'm getting value out of that particular line item. Let me now drill down on it. If I can improve that line item by 10%, then that's a win, and I've done well. And just do that and have that as your project for 1 month. Then the next month, you go and you pick another target. And every time, you're just trying to make an overall 1% improvement. Because if you just do that once a month, continually, you'll be making some really good progress.
Then you have to start with all your insurances, your gas, your electricity, bank loans.
Yeah, exactly. Because your home loan, if you can get your home loan 0.5% cheaper, that's thousands of dollars a year. And it's not like you're getting any value out of it other than the, you know, unless you've got a particular loyalty to your bank. But quite often, I can tell you now, once again from experience, I had no intention of moving my home loans just because it's just too hard. I made one phone call and I said to the bank, look, I know that I can get, because I've got a finance broker who's knocking on my door, just make up a story. I know that I could get my home loan interest rate at about 1% less than what you're charging me. What can you do? Because I really don't want to have to go through the process of changing, but can you help me? I got a 0.5% discount within that, I'll call it 2-minute phone call. They didn't even hesitate. So they've clearly got a mandate where they can actually just push a button to give you an extra discount. You just got to ask
All
for
your
it.
insurances are like that too. If you ring up and say a better deal and they
Oh,
knock
well,
a bit off
yeah.
automatically.
Look,
It's just asking.
I was going to say, what's the worst they can do?
2-minute phone
The
call.
worst they can do is say, no, that's the best price we
No,
can
it's
do.
built into the record, into their programs. They
Well,
just-
some of them you do, and some, yeah, I've tried it on some insurances and they won't do it. So I think it just depends.
Yeah.
But it's worth a phone call, as long as you're prepared to wait on hold for a little bit. But sometimes it's not even that hard.
No.
But yeah, just go through your big ticket items. Start with the big ticket items. But then if you think about that concept of financial leakage, with my definition being it's money that's going out that doesn't really mean that much to you, then that's a good target to start with. Yeah. Okay. All right. Has anybody else got a question?
Yeah, what's a DVA?
Oh, what's a DVA pension? It's a Department of Veteran Affairs
Yeah.
pension. So if you're an ex-serviceman or something like that, then you'll have access to basically there's special rules that are a little bit better than your normal age pension rules.
Thing?
Yep,
And other benefits like the
Oh.
gold card.
correct.
Mm.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yep, absolutely.
Does that gold card cover things like Chinese medicine?
Oh, you're going to say Chinese meals.
I don't
Take
know.
away.
I think with the gold card, my father had one, and if you wanted to go to allied health like physio or something like that, your GP had to do a referral.
Yep.
And then,
Ah.
so the GP was in control of, and then once the referral had been done, then you didn't pay.
Yeah. Now that's actually available as well, even for age pensioners to a certain point.
Is
The doctors are allowed to, because I'm thinking of my mum now, she's allowed to basically elect for 5 appointments with an allied health professional of some description. It could be physio, it could be a podiatrist, it could be
Mental health.
mental health, it could be a dietitian. There's a range, and as long as you get the doctors to set it up, you then basically get, I mean, some practitioners do it for free if they're on this program, but some of them it's just that you get a rebate of $56 or something like that per appointment. So once again, yeah, if you've got the age pension happening, talk to your doctor about that. Mum literally just uses it every year. She just says, I'll just have the podiatry, please.
Oh, I don't think you have to have an age pension for that health plan.
That might not be for the,
I
Is
think
it
you,
seniors?
no, I think if you've got some pre-existing condition,
Ah.
like, for example, diabetes or something, then
yes,
the GP
can recommend that.
can
Right.
recommend that program,
Yeah.
whatever it's called. I
Yes.
can't think what it's
Yeah, I
called.
can't remember what it's called either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the same with sometimes your local council might give you some sort of assistance in the home is another thing as you get older and more
You have to
infirm.
be assessed and everything.
Correct. You got to go through you've got
And
to
it's very
jump through the
reasonable
hoops.
rates.
Correct. I know. I had
It's like
a friend of mine whose
$85 an
mum
hour.
was getting their gardening done for $5 a week. I was
Yeah.
like- but it meant that he didn't have to go up the ladder
Yes.
to clear out the spouting and all those sorts of things that you shouldn't be doing supposedly after the age of 50. So yeah, it's worth actually just having a good understanding of anything you're likely to be entitled to. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point.
Okay, have I got any other questions that you haven't
Oh, there's
covered on your
loads.
lists?
Okay.
You don't have anything else?
No.
No. Oh, good.
Oh, you had a good question. to know.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a retirement number, so that was, we talked about that.
Oh,
How much
the
is
magic
it?
number. How much do you need to retire?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the simple answer is that there's no simple answer. But essentially, this projections process, the projections process that we go through, that's actually a modelling process that we've got, where we can basically put in, a little bit like what I said earlier, we put in where all your assets, your liabilities, how much is in super, how long are you going to continue to work for and at what level, and what do you spend, what do you need to live. We also ask questions like, okay, well, you know, how often are you going to change your car over? How much do we need to allow for, you know, major repairs and maintenance on the house? Because we know that, you know, things blow up and, you know, you need to spend time, you know, if you've got a house, you've got expenses every now and then. How often do you want to go on holidays? You know, what does that look like? You know, is it $50,000? Is it $2,000? You know, what does your picture of your lifestyle in retirement look like? What we want to do is we want to model that so that you can see graphically, if you like, how that looks for you. And that is, it might be, here's one I prepared earlier. Let me just jump to this, as long as I haven't timed out. So basically, what I've done here is I've basically just put in Barack and Michelle Obama, put in some dummy information for them. And I'll just take you through the picture that we have as the output. I've just put things like, he wants to upgrade his car every 5 years between them for X amount of dollars, they've got this many holidays and whatnot. Basically what we then finish up with, other than the fact that the mere questioning process that goes around it is actually really valuable, and also the homework you need to do in advance of having this meeting with us is really valuable, because this is where I say to you, here's the spreadsheet, go and work out how much it actually costs you to live. Okay, go and do that process. I'll actually send you that spreadsheet after tonight so that you can go through that. But essentially what we want to see is this bar here is essentially what your net assets do over time. Now, in this example that I've done, because I just was picking numbers from everywhere, he's actually got his assets going up in value. Now, that's probably not particularly realistic. So if I just change some of the assumptions, yeah, so that's probably something that's more realistic, if you like. So this is someone who is spending $80,000 a year.
It's a couple.
As a couple, yep. They're starting off with net assets, excluding their home and excluding cars and things like that. So this is essentially investable assets of $1.5 million. You can see here I've got their expenditures sort of, you know, jagging up every now and then because they're buying a car every 5 years and he's going on a holiday up until he's in his 80s and then he doesn't. But basically, that's basically showing that his assets are going to last through till the point in time when he's, here we go, at age 98, he's still got assets of about $300,000. Now this is all CPI adjusted, because I don't know about you, but I can't comprehend the fact that in 10 years' time a loaf of bread's going to probably cost me $50. I don't get it. So if we bring it all back to the equivalent in today's dollars, then that's a lot more useful. But basically, this is what we want to be able to see, because the bottom line is, if this picture is going to land here, where I'm going to run out of money at age 81, I'm thinking you're going to want to know that before you retire. So you can either make a different decision about when you retire, or you have some time to trim up where your expenses are. Because, I'll show you a more, I'll just change I'll change the assumption about, how much super they've got, just so that so the picture doesn't look quite as healthy. So if I just put hers, I'll just pull it down by 300,000. And I'm just going to show you Yeah, so see how now I've got them running out of money at age 93 or thereabouts.
What's the brown bars?
The brown, that brown bar, that's actually when Centrelink kicks in. So what this is actually doing in the background, not only does it calculate any tax on your earnings and all that sort of stuff, it's also basically saying, well, here we're using your superannuation money, and at this point your Centrelink's likely to kick in, so we're going to use some from the Centrelink, and then your superannuation's going to be the balancing item until such time as that money runs out, and then you've got to rely on your Centrelink pension from then on. So that's essentially how it's working, all of this in the background. But what this is doing, so let's say this example is that they're running out of money at age 93. So this is where we have a really robust discussion about, well, what does that mean to you? And you might say, well, that's okay, because I've got a family home because my kids have only just moved out the last couple of years. It's way too big for us on our own. I'll probably sell that and put some of the proceeds of the downsize of my home into super, and that's going to get me the rest of the way or whatever. And that's cool.
What if you're just a single and you're going to live on Centrelink and your income stream? Do you need to do one of these?
Well, my question is that actually possible?
That's plenty.
Well, if it is, then you possibly don't
No
need to.
dependents, no cat, no dog, just...
But what you can also do is,
You just do the whole session on this, or do you do the whole picture?
no, we do the whole picture. This is
Okay,
like the
this is part of
smallest.
it.
Yeah, this is a
Okay,
small part of it.
Yeah.
So, if you think about there's three main things that make a difference to that picture, other than obviously the amount that it starts with. But the three things that once you start it, that will influence that picture. Well, let me open it to the floor. What do you think they might be?
Health.
Well, yeah, how long
Health.
you need it for? Yeah, absolutely, health.
Yeah.
But what's going to impact how long that money might last? What are the variables do you think that flow into that mostly?
Discretionary spending.
Yep. So how much you spend is one of them. Yep.
Returns on investment.
Return on investment is the other one, and there's one more, and that is how long you continue to work. So how long you're going to work for. So when are you going to retire? So up here, what I've done here is, this is the difference that it makes in relation to the rate of return. There's a reason why I'm showing you this. But what you can see is that our example was that they were running out of money at age 93, which is a balanced investor. I've just assumed that they're invested in a balanced way, okay? If they were to go to growth, which in most instances we don't tend to be terribly enthusiastic about that when you're retiring because it's too much risk, that will take you from age 93 up to 97. If you went down a risk bracket, down to moderate, it takes you from 93 down to about 91. So it's moving the needle, but not dramatically. The other thing we said was the retirement age. Now, in my example, I've only got Michelle Obama working for a little bit longer. So this is the example of her either retiring 2 years earlier or retiring 2 years later. So you can see once again, you look at this and you go, okay, well that's really only making a year's difference. Probably because I've made an assumption that she's not earning a huge amount. So it's not really, once again, not really moving the needle that much. Then we look at the cost of living, so your example, and if they were to spend 15% more than the $80,000, then their money is, instead of running out of money at age 93, they're going to run out of money at age 90. If they reduce their spending by 15%, then it goes up and they're actually not running out of money. Even at age 99, they've still got some money left. So of all of those three factors, the thing that was the biggest impact was them saving money on how much they're spending. Now the reality, I didn't do that. Anyway.
You've got your reverse mortgages. too.
You can do that, exactly. And this is the
Home
thing, is there's always
and your
some alternatives. It might be there is an inheritance coming your way that we can factor in. It might be that we factor in that there's the reverse mortgage that we can use. We might factor in that you might want to downsize at some point. The fact of the matter is that there is often levers that you can pull, but you need to know what those possibilities are
and build them in.
and build them in.
So
and
it's
that
worth
way
doing.
You get, it is worth doing, Yvonne. And in your case, we can talk about things like your super tax deductions and the capital gains and the things that go around that.
And no dependence, and
Yeah,
I may as well
correct.
spend the money myself.
Exactly.
And not sit on my,
Spot on.
yeah.
Exactly. So that's why, that's the process that we go to, because that way what we finish up with, so in your instance, you might be asking the question, how much money do I need before I can comfortably retire?
Yeah.
That will help us get that number, okay? If you're already retired, it might be that the question that you're asking is, how long will my money last? And then the extension to that is, and what might I be able to do in the meantime, in between times, in order to make sure that I am okay? And this is where discussions about the reverse mortgage, the downsizing of the house, the selling that rental property, or whatever the case might be, this is where those types of discussions come into place. Okay, so once again, these are not one size fits all things, because the whole nature, and I hope I've gotten this across to you really clearly, these are very personal decisions. And it is going to be very personal to you, because your needs are very different from each other. And that's the reality. And they're not wrong, they're just different. Therefore, every solution or every strategy needs to be geared to your situation. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter answer. So I hope that that's given you something to think about.
Yes, a lot to chew on.
A lot to chew on. I've got some follow-up material that I'm going to send through, or get the team to send through to you tomorrow. Part of it is going to be a little bit more detail, and a link to another webinar that I did on that projections process, so you can actually see that in a little bit more detail. I find that it's actually really good for you just to go through that, because even if all it does is it makes you ask yourself some questions.
Yeah.
Okay, it's actually a really valuable process to go through. I'll also send through that budget spreadsheet. And I know it says budget, and I hate the fact that it says budget, but it's a really good spreadsheet to help you to work out where does your money go. It's just really well set out, and it's easy to use. You literally just toggle between, oh, well, that expense is weekly and that one is monthly, and then it extrapolates it out to annually, which is really useful. But I will say to you, prepare yourself to be confronted. So make sure you do it and be emotionally safe. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate
Thank you.
the discussion.
Thank you. Yes.
And I've really enjoyed your questions, so thank you for that. I always enjoy it when it's interactive, as you can probably tell. Feel free to grab a drink before you go, or grab something to eat. Otherwise, I'm going to be taking home some food for my family, which will be okay, because my son's coming home from
I love
his
it.
travels tomorrow, and he's a 22-year-old boy, and he eats like 3 men. Lovely to meet you all. If you need a hand, or you want to take the next step, then probably I find that the best next step quite often is that projections process. There's some information
And
about
then
that in
you
your
come
little
for a
thing.
chat, and then
Yeah.
costs and whatever else. and
Yep, spot on.
The hard stuff.
Yep, exactly. And that's the other thing that we will always quote before we actually do any work for you.
Yeah.
So that's not like there's this smoke and mirrors and all that sort of stuff. I think that probably comes from the fact that we're accountants by trade, if you like.
Yeah.
Therefore, for us, it's all about transparency and what's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And if we can't see that we can add value to your situation, then we don't want to do the work unless it's going to be of value to you. So it's always a bit of a value cost way up, and we are completely understanding of that. So, and we'll always be really transparent about all that.